From RFN Studios, this is Radio Free Norfolk. There's been a lot of change in Norfolk County lately, and it started with our new council. Another thing that has changed very often in this council is the role of CAO, of Chief Administrative Officer. Our CAO, Jason Burgess, took time to sit down with us and let us get to know him a little better.
What made me choose Norfolk? I was a partner with a national consulting firm called M&P. I was engaged by the acting CEO at the time, Harry Schlang, to help out with what he perceived to be a budgetary and financial issue that the county was facing, that he had evaluated when he came in and did his initial evaluation. So I worked with county staff for the 2020 budget to go through the budget and to look at some of those issues and be able to document those issues to council. So I had the ability to see staff, work with staff, and kind of knew the situation. The funny part of the story is I never applied for the CAO position. I was a partner with a firm. Council had engaged in a CAO search. I'm not exactly sure what happened. But when council reviewed the resumes, the clerk had called and said that council had directed her to ask if I would be interested in putting a resume forward. And they were going to amend their process to do that. I thought about it over the weekend. It was, an interesting challenge. I already worked with the people, so then I decided to put the resume in. I was interviewed by council, and council chose to hire me. So that was the process. To me, I think that Norfolk County is facing some challenging issues, and being able to work with some good staff to go through some of those tough issues is always interesting to someone like myself. So that's kind of why I chose it.
Now, that kind of leads to another question I have, because you never see, little Johnny in kindergarten saying, I want to be a CAO when I grow up. So how did you get on that career path?
It's interesting. I trained as an accountant. I was a typical accountant working for a public firm. I switched over to corporate finance and consulting work for Deloitte. I spent 15 years with Deloitte. And ironically enough, Harry Schlang was a newly minted CAO at Niagara Region. He convinced me to join Niagara Region, and that was my first taste of working inside of the public sector, inside of municipal government. I eventually became the treasurer for Niagara Region after a few years, and kind of liked the work. I left Niagara Region, went back to private industry, back to my consulting world. But, working in the public sector has a lot of benefits that you can't get from the private sector. Private sector, you can make more money, you can do some cool stuff. The one thing with the public sector and working with a municipality is the work is very neat, it's diverse. There's not a lot of companies in the world that does everything from making sure that you have safe water to fire protection to ambulance protection, to running hockey arenas. So the diversity of work, the diversity of things that you have to deal with is unique to a municipality, and that's fun. It makes it a fun work environment to deal with those different challenges. And you get to drive some community benefit to it. There's things that you can do that you can actually see the benefit that others get from the work that you do. Some days it's tough to see those joys, and sometimes the wins are always tough to see, but at the end of the day, it can be very rewarding work.
I was curious to know what life in Norfolk County has looked like for Mr. Burgess so far, and he was very honest.
My family, I still have a home in St. Catharines, and my wife is still working in St. Catharines, and I'm at that point in time where my kids are at two different schools, so my family's kind of diverse at this point in time, so I do have a place here in Norfolk. To be honest with you, you have to remember I started my job on April 1st, so we are already in COVID. I certainly have visited a few things in Norfolk. It was a little tougher to visit things during COVID as things weren't open. A lot of staff here, if you drive by, you'll see cars in the parking lot here till 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And you started off again at 8 in the morning. So most of my time when I'm in Norfolk, it's usually work here till 8, go home, grab something to eat, return emails, look at some reports, and repeat the next day. So I unfortunately haven't been able to see as much as I would of all the fun stuff that there is to do in Norfolk.
Is there any favorite restaurants or anything like that yet?
Well, as a municipal employee, I'm always careful to not put out an endorsement. There's lots of good restaurants in Norfolk County. I will say that I may have frequented 211 a few times on Main Street. Because I'm not the greatest cook, and when you're single and you're just working essentially all the time, I've hit most of the takeout places in Simcoe and in Port Dover. That being said, I think I've hit every microbrewery in Norfolk County and maybe a few on the bordering in Haldimand, just to check out the competition. And I've hit every winery actually here in Norfolk also. So and I do it purely just as market research. So that's my excuse. I have to do it. So that's my excuse, and I'm sticking with it.
You're just immersing yourself in the culture,
yeah.
right?
I just happen to start with the breweries and the wineries first, and the restaurants.
When it comes to getting to know Mr. Burgess, my biggest question was, does he plan to stay?
Good question. CAOs are like coaches in sports teams. You get hired to get fired to a large extent. That, years ago, CAOs would last a very long period of time. That doesn't seem to be the trend anymore. That when new councils come in and there's a change in direction, there seems to be a change in senior staff generally. So, that's always an issue. With this particular one, anytime you do a restructuring, which is what's required here at Norfolk, I remember I told counselors when they hired me, and they were very happy. And I said, well, once you go through all the tough stuff that you have to do during a restructuring, sometimes you won't be happy by the end of it, because it's like going to the dentist, and you get your cavity filled and you get some pain and that kind of stuff. You might not like your dentist after that. So that's a reality of this type of position in this type of situation where backs are up against the wall and some tough decisions have to be made.
And how do you balance your role as CAO? The way that I see it is your role is almost to kind of mediate between council and staff to figure out what's feasible within the wishes of council, right? And how do you balance that, giving suggestions but not necessarily leading them in any particular direction?
Yeah, different people have different philosophies on that. And because I came from the private sector, I've spent far more time in the private sector than I have with government. I have a philosophy, and I've said this to staff, is that we will bring suggestions to council, and we're going to make strong recommendations and things that we believe in. Because if you don't believe that you're doing the right thing, I'd question why you're writing the report to council and making that recommendation. And, especially when you're making some of the tough decisions we have to make. And council is the ultimate authority, so they can reject our recommendations, choose to go a different path, and we execute on that as they see fit, because that's what it is. But we take a more proactive approach, and I've asked staff to take a more proactive approach, to go out there, to look for solutions, to think outside the box, and bring stuff to council. This council, when they first got elected, they wanted to look at doing things differently, and we're continuing on with that. So I don't view it so much as a mediation. I view it as a partnership where staff bring forward suggestions to fix the problems and bring forward stuff that they believe in, and council makes their decisions, and then we execute based upon the decisions that are made. You can get into a situation with some, and I've seen it in some municipalities and some cultures of staff where they just wait for council to decide on everything, and then they go and then they backtalk and say, well, that was not a great decision and council should have done that. But they were never willing to, buck up and put those good suggestions on the table and fight for something that they believe in. And if you're not willing to do that, then you can't complain with how, council had made the decision. And if you, do put forward a suggestion or a recommendation to council that you do believe in, and council decides to go another way, well, that's the way it is. But at least you put your best foot forward and don't have any regrets for not actually standing up and being counted. So that's the approach I've asked staff here to take, and it doesn't happen immediately, but you can see more and more of that coming through. If you look at it as a glass half full or a glass half empty, we've had to bring a bunch of reports to council this year that weren't pretty. We hadn't charged drainage cost out for, like, in some cases 15 years. We had issues going on with major projects that not all the information was brought forward. But now staff has seen how council's reacted to more openness, more bringing all the dirty laundry out to the table, recognizing some mistakes, and just moving on. And I think once you have that, then it's much easier for the county to function more effectively and have those good debates.
When Mr. Burgess first began his work for Norfolk County, he noticed we did a lot of things differently. One thing he pointed out was the lack of public consultation in terms of the budget. I asked him if there were more outdated practices and if this was something that was common in the other municipalities that he'd seen.
I think it happens everywhere, and municipalities change. But yeah, so on the one instance when I came in here as with M&P, and I'd ask, okay, what was your budget consultation process? And there was none. It was a bit odd, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't working for Norfolk before that either. So yeah, we've changed some practices, and I've asked staff to bring forward some practices. If they're boring reports and that kind of stuff, but there's been a number of reports from finance that has come forward to modernize some of our approaches, to allow us to collect accounts earlier, to change how we look at things. And I think what's happening is staff are doing a better job at bringing to council items and explaining and providing the why behind their recommending something and making those changes. The one thing I will say about staff here is that, yes, we have some tough things to do, but there's some energy in the building now because they know that we can make some changes, some of the changes they've been wanting to make for a long time. So I think you're going to see a lot of change coming forward, and it's driven by staff. Yeah, were there some practices that maybe, could have been changed and that? Yeah, but every organization's like that. I tell the staff here, I go, whatever we do today, we're probably changing it in 3 or 4 years, because if you're not changing with the community and you're not changing with the new demands, then you're always going to be falling behind. We always need to be out there looking at what's important to the community to execute on them. So if you looked at 5 years ago, mobile payments for municipalities probably wasn't a big thing, but there's more and more people would like to pay stuff off their phone. And in 5 years' time, I don't know what the next technology is going to be, but more and more people want to do something different. We just need to continually change to meet that.
We're in this tough spot where we have all these aging facilities. We do need to figure out how best to move forward, whether it's consolidating facilities, whatever we can do. Do you have a plan in mind for engaging that public consultation?
Yeah, there's one going on right now with the arenas and the halls. There's literally maybe 1,000 pages out on the internet of different information on that. And I think if you look at other communities, there's this misconception that process is out there to close arenas or halls. To me, the process is there to say, is there a way that the community can participate in keeping those halls and arenas open? And it's happened in other communities. Where I'm from in St. Catharines, there's the Meriton Athletic Association runs one of the city's arenas, and ironically runs it at no cost to the taxpayer on a daily basis. The only thing that really costs the taxpayers is any major capital improvements. The City of Toronto has a number of arenas that are under a board. It's called the Arena Board in Toronto. Again, they are run by this board. They are still City of Toronto assets, but that board manages to run the arenas at either just a very slight loss or in some years a very slight gain on it. Because when the community runs it and the community's invested in it, they can do things that a municipality can't do for a variety of reasons. We have union collective agreements, and we have things that we can't, do where if it's a privately run organization, they can follow under different rules. So we're looking for good ideas to come forward in that process, and then council will decide. We'll take some of those recommendations from the people in the municipality and take that up to council. That's for all public assets like arenas and halls. Norfolk County, from an administrative point of view, I have staff in Simcoe. We have one building over on Robinson. We have another building over on Gilbert. We have another one on 95 Culvert Street, and we have this building that you're in here with council. anyone who'd look at that would say that's really not a very efficient model to have your staff spread out in one municipality of Simcoe in a number of buildings. And I'm not exactly sure why we got to this point, but we're at this point, and we're working on a plan to say that doesn't make a lot of sense going forward. If you look at what Haldeman just did, they just consolidated their operations into one building. We need to move to that. That's a 10-year project to do that, but we're staff's already starting to work on it, and we're looking to make it efficient for the taxpayers.
When I interviewed Mr. Burgess, it was before council had voted to execute the buyback clause for the hub land. While I understand that it was a politically safe thing to do and was sticking to the plan, I was a little disappointed that we didn't take more time to at least consider the other options.
Everybody's obviously talking about this whole hubland situation. Is there anything that you can tell us on kind of the other options that were implied in council?
Sure. And there's public information that we've put on our website. So the hub lands were bought for approximately $3.3 million. I don't remember the exact number. The county has appraisals on those properties for a significantly higher amount. So the question for council will be, why not just give us a little bit of time and see if we can actually do something and capture more value back for the taxpayers on that? There's also other pressing needs that we can look at strategically. Norfolk County does not control a lot of industrial land. Many counties and municipalities for economic development like to control land so they can attract businesses and employment into those lands. That's something that council can decide on. The issue of affordable housing is very present in Norfolk County for a variety of reasons. We have a vacancy level that's less than 2% or 1%. So there's no rental properties. As a guy who came in to take a job, I couldn't find a place to live here. There's no rental and it's difficult to buy a place. When I talk to the employers here, the major employers, they are continually looking because they can't get their staff located here. So people are commuting in to the county, and then if they find something closer to their home, they then drop this job and get something closer to their home. But if they had a place to live here more permanently, then we can start to stabilize that workforce for the employers. There's lots of things that could be done strategically with the land. Staff will lay that out. The report will be coming in the next few weeks for council. And it'll be up to council to decide. But we negotiated, and I wasn't here at the time. That was the mayor. The mayor led those negotiations. So the mayor got a very good price on that land, and we have the flexibility to potentially take that to the advantage to the county. All staff's going to say is, why not explore some other potentials with it? When you look at the price of the land, like what we bought it for is well below appraised value. So the land is not that expensive because it's in the urban boundary, it's development ready, so it can be developed. We had to acquire it because the project for the submission had to be shovel ready, but we didn't view the land as expensive, because if we were to go and buy the land for any other purpose, we'd be probably paying more for it. So I think it was a large block of land, so that might have been some of the reason for it. Like, people look at the number 3.2 million and say, oh, that's an expensive number, but when you break it down on a per acre basis, it wasn't an expensive purchase, and our appraisals actually point that out quite well. At the time of that deal, I was just a consultant hired, and so the only thing that staff asked me for was to assist with the put clause to give some flexibility to it. The mayor asked me to look at that, and so we put in what I would consider a very generous put clause on our behalf to give us this flexibility. We don't have to do anything with it. Our put clause is open till 2021. So we have not quite another year, but almost, we have like 6, 7, or 8 months, I think, left to deal with this land issue without being put in a corner at that point in time. So
I looked into the appraisals, and indeed, the land that Norfolk County secured for about $3.2 million has the potential to be sold for $5.2 to $9.7 million. If we can turn a profit and use that money to benefit our community, I'm willing to at least listen. During the September 8th meeting, there was a lot of good discussion, clarification, and grievances aired. I asked Mr. Burgess how he and staff felt after that meeting.
From staff's point of view, and I made this point at council, we didn't see the lack of clarity. The motion in May that this council approved, was very clear that a report was to come back to council. Now, at the time, we had delayed it because of COVID, and we still didn't know what was happening, and that no decisions were to be made except for council. So staff had always been operating under, very clear direction. It's unfortunate that there was confusion out there and confusion with the councillors, but the thoughts that staff had going into it and the thoughts that staff had going out of it were the same. I think there were some councillors that were also of the same opinion, that they understood what the process was going to be. So, could we do a better job communicating out some of that stuff? Yeah.
That better communication between council, staff, the media, and community is extremely important for us to make progress. Mr. Burgess has faced a significant amount of backlash since he came to work for Norfolk County, and he actually took the time to speak with former Mayor Charlie Luke.
Listen, I got 2 strikes against me. I'm a blue suit consultant that everyone looks at, and I'm not from here. So I know every room I walk into, I got 2 strikes against me. But I asked him about the culture, and he was elected for just under 40 years and was an educator here. And so I went to him, not to talk about specific issues, but just to talk about how he viewed how the public was. And he gave me some good insight on that. So I do appreciate for him. And he recognizes that, we don't have an easy job during COVID and during, the issues that are here that we're facing with. And he did say that, Norfolk County has a group of people that are very passionate, and with passion, there's two sides of it. Sometimes I can see the ugly side, and sometimes you can see the good side in it. You just got to cut through it and keep doing the right thing, and hopefully it all works out.
It's a tough job, the role of CAO. But Mr. Burgess seems to be very understanding of the fact that people are going to be passionate about their community and that change is not always easily accepted.
In business, there's risk in anything you do, no different with the municipality. But one of my comments to clients all the time is, I'm not the one putting my head down on your pillow. So you have to be able to fall asleep at night. So what may bother you might not bother me. And you have to do that. With a municipality, when you're business, you get to make all those decisions. And when you're a municipality, you have to consider more stakeholders, and it's always tougher. Like I said, Starbucks gets to pick and choose their customers. A municipality doesn't. And people always say, the municipality should run like a business. Well, in some cases, yeah, but in other cases, it can't. Because if I chose the Starbucks model and said, and I don't drink coffee, so I won't get the prices right, but, it's $6 for whatever type of grande, whatever type of fancy coffee they have. If you want a cheap, plain version of a coffee, well, don't come to my store, go to another store. Businesses can make those decisions and fine-tune their product going to it, but municipalities can't. We have to serve everybody, and it becomes a much more complex business model than private businesses actually have to deal with. And that's what makes it neat from a guy like me who's been on both sides. There's a lot of challenges in it. There's a lot of reward to it also. And so it doesn't matter what you do. And with social media, they're going to, the people that you didn't serve quite right or has a different view, they're going to toast you on it. But you just got to be confident in what you put forward and to council and live with it. And that's why, and I've said it a few times, and I said it last council meeting, you can disagree with me and you can disagree with staff recommendations and all that stuff, but don't change the facts. The facts are the facts. And though we may have a president south of the border that has a concept of alternative facts, I'm still not convinced that there's alternative facts. I think there are facts, and two people might interpret the facts differently, and you can get two different plans from the same group of facts. That's normal and that's appropriate. But if everyone can agree to what the facts are and not misinterpret them, then kind of go from there. And I think when we look forward to the budget process, if you think social media is blowing up now, wait wait a few months because last budget was a tough budget. This budget will be a tougher budget. We're in a process where because we have no reserves left, we're on pay as you go. So when we need to replace $30 million of something, we have to borrow $30 million. And when you borrow that, you're going to increase your tax rates to pay for the full load of the debt each and every year. So it's like when you have a house, you're already mortgaged up pretty good and you have no income, but now you have to fix a roof. You keep on having to borrow more and more money and your expenses keep on going just because you have to pay the interest and the principal on that. We're into a number of years for potential increases unless we change how we do things. And so those decisions will be, I'm sure, passionately, debated in Twitter and Facebook and on the council floor. So
with the political landscape expanding onto social media these days, it is a lot tougher to be a politician or serve the community in an administrative role such as CAO.
And the elected officials, I think, get it, worse. I think you have to listen to it, but you don't have to react to it. That's the difference. Just because, 100 people on Twitter said something. Well, last time I checked, there's 65,000 people in the county. And a lot of times when something gets really hot and heavy out there in a debate, there's a lot of silent people out there who don't want to stick their neck out because it's not worth their headache. There's a silent majority out there that you never hear from. And you have to have other ways to go and reach out to them. And the reality is, I always say, it's a lot of inside baseball here, which is a sports analogy that some people might, but there's a lot of people that are married, that are busy at work, that have 2 kids in school, and they don't have the time or the energy to invest in reading everything that's going on at municipal government. And if they did, well, then good for them, or maybe they need another hobby, I'm not sure. But that's the reality. There's a lot of information out there that the average person doesn't see, doesn't get, so they'll express their views and we have to factor that in based upon what they know and how it goes. So I'd be lying to you to say I don't look at Facebook and I don't look at Twitter, and I'd be lying to you to say, I'm always calm, cool, and collected when I see some stuff that's there. Yeah, does it tick people off? Yeah, but you gotta, exhale and step back and do the work and try not to let it bother you too much.
Living in West Norfolk myself, I was very interested to see if Mr. Burgess had any ideas on connecting the more rural hamlets to the city centers.
Yeah, it is a challenge, and I think the first thing about connecting, and I hate using the term, and I try not to use it, the West End, the West and the East. I think one of the first things we have to do is stop using those terms. And when I hear people say, the Simcoe arenas or Waterford arena, they're all Norfolk arenas. I know the county was put together and split up and put back together again. So I understand the history there, but you have to start looking at Norfolk County as one county. And therefore, the connectivity needs to be, required. People will say I'm the Cividiot and I come from another place. But in St. Catharines, I would live in one part of the town and it might take me 20 minutes to get to a hockey arena, even though it's all in one city. But I don't view that as, that's the West End arena and where's my... It just, we moved all over. And in fact, in Niagara, you might be practicing outside of your actual town. When I come here, I live in Dover, I work in Simcoe, I do things all over the place. 15 minutes in a car gets me a lot of places, I find, because there's thankfully there's not a lot of traffic, and I may sometimes be slightly higher than the posted speed limit because there's just not a lot of traffic out there. So to get around here in 15 minutes is good. So I think there's 2 things. We need to connect more people from Simcoe and Dover to some of the stuff that we have in Langton and Delhi, and we need to connect some of the people from Langton and Delhi in a bit more and make sure that there's that movement of stuff. So one of the things that, the controversy of closing the rec center in Simcoe, one of the items for that was to move the hours of ice there to some of the other communities, because we need to ensure that instead of having 6 arenas all at 60% occupancy, and Langton not having anyone skating there on a Sunday made no sense. So to save those assets, you need to fill those assets up so that they're good. Because what I want to see is, I'd love to be in a situation where there's so much going on in each of those arenas, then we need to build more, right? So I think if we can get more people out to Langton using that arena, then that helps the arena out and makes it stay. So, the plan is to say, okay, what are our assets in all the community? What makes sense to make sure that services are reasonably allocated to everybody, and try to avoid that this asset here is only for the residents of Simcoe, or this asset here is only for the residents of Delhi. You got to look at the county as a whole, and I can understand it. Like, I sat out in Langton for more than 2 hours getting yelled at, and I think what happened from there was, in that meeting, most people disbelieve that we were in a financial crisis. It's almost like when you have you have to admit that you have a problem first. They weren't ready to admit that they had a problem first. But we got through that. They now understand that there is a financial crisis. I have groups like, business organizations from Delhi and stuff saying, okay, well, how do we help out now? We yelled at you because we didn't believe that there was a problem, but now we get the fact there's a problem. So now let's move into a solution. And actually, I tell Councillor Columbus a lot. The number of phone calls I get on stuff from Delhi is nowhere near what I get from some of the other ones, because I think that community, they're looking at doing some solutions, and we're moving ahead with it. So I think once this is all shakes out, we need to deliver reasonable service to everybody in the county. And it's not, I need to do so much for the West End and so much for the East End.
Well, I think it was when we were interviewing Charlie Luke, he had mentioned, the proportion of people on well water, and you can only have the people who are paying like the user fees for the municipal water pay into that. You can't try and subsidize it over the county, is like, say, bringing municipal water, because I know they're getting internet with this provincial project, is bringing municipal water in further out rural areas a possibility?
It is and it isn't. So we are looking at it. Former Mayor Luke was correct, and people misunderstand that. So when you look at water is very expensive. We have just around 15,000 customers on municipal water, but we have multiple water treatment plants and sewage treatment plants. Like in a condensed municipality, you would have like one water plant, one treatment center. That's it. We have to have multiples because of our geography, which makes it very, very expensive. So it's public knowledge. We are looking at teaming up with Haldeman. They have a very large capacity plant. Could we bring in one pipe from there? And if we did that, you could connect more to the west. There's people on private well systems, but our municipality is also on well systems. Like, some of our municipal water is coming from wells. And there's some concerns about that because we're having difficulty adding capacity to the wells. So everyone's focused on Port Dover, but it's not just Port Dover. Our reports that we have water issues in Waterford, Simcoe. Delhi is actually in good shape for the foreseeable future, but with growth and other stuff, we're going to have issues there. So the water thing is important, and I think putting treated water from lake drawn water out to the West End in Delhi and stuff is something that is potentially out there in the foreseeable future, and we're just starting the plans on that. So I think you may see that.
We thank Mr. Burgess for taking time to speak with us. And although I was hoping to hear that Norfolk would have a more consistent CAO, it appears as if Jason Burgess will be more of a Mary Poppins to Norfolk County. With all of the discontent and some days outrage over municipal politics in Norfolk County lately, it's important to remember that our politicians and administrative staff are people too. That being said, Radio Free Norfolk will continue to pay attention and is committed to holding our local politicians accountable.